LTV and CAC, the model that we use every day for our clients, we use for ourselves. We're going to get into some now a little bit, like we've gone over what a lifetime value is, what customer acquisition cost is, the elements of each. Quick recap on last episode: the elements of lifetime value, frequency of purchase, average purchase size or average order value, if you will, and contribution margin. And customer acquisition cost, really simple. It's like mitigation of cost, right? What are some of the characteristics when we're looking at these two things? Because they are very different, right? So the characteristics of lifetime value, highly controllable by companies. So why this matters? Lifetime value is fundamentally about strategy, right? So it's always a little bit more controllable than customer acquisition costs, which we'll get into. And the reason is that if you look at frequency of purchase, if you look at average purchase size and contribution margin, we can control our contribution margin, right? Because we can increase prices, we can lower cost of goods sold. We can also increase price, like we can increase price, bundles, subscriptions, all of these things, right? So highly controllable by us. And you might say, like, the market dictates some of these things. It's like, yeah, you have competitors, don't get me wrong. That's absolutely true.
The market's always changing, but for example, it's like you see the market. This is what we're taught, like in marketing when we start out. It's like you look at the market positioning, you decide where to go in the market. Where's the blue ocean? Branding, highly controllable, right? If you want to take a position in the market, that's highly controllable.
Exactly, right? So like you have control over it. You might not have control of it like immediate term. So look, it is somewhat influenced by the market. It is, right? Because again, you have competitors, if you have raw costs, if you have raw material costs, or if you're purchasing something and reselling it, there's influences acting upon you in terms of like the market has some control of this. Can you sell that product at a premium? Can you increase the brand position of your company? You have infinite control over those factors. Right? So you can control that. So there's a big difference of marking something up by 5% and then reselling it versus creating a luxury brand where you could maybe get like 90% contribution out of it. So again, the market does have an influence on you, especially in the near term. However, with enough long-term planning, really you're in the driver's seat here of controlling that lifetime value from that aspect.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the other characteristics here is that it's mid to long term in nature. When we're talking about building a brand, that's not short term, right? When we talk about short term, we're talking about things like budgets. Do we turn on a new campaign? Do we turn off a campaign? How do we want to focus our marketing budget in the short term? Mid to long term, we're really talking about initiatives that are lasting, branding initiatives, content. These are things you can control the lifetime value in the short term a little bit, but this is really about looking long term. How do we get that long term customer to stick with us for the lifetime?
Yeah, and this is the domain of strategy, right? I always get asked, where does strategy fit in? And I'm like, it primarily fits in around like the LTV side of the equation. Don't get me wrong, strategy also belongs in customer acquisition cost. However, the majority of the lifetime value side is affected by the strategy. That is like almost wholly affected by the strategy, whereas like customer acquisition cost is affected by strategy a little bit, but it's actually way more affected by the tactics that are then implemented in support of that strategy, right? So like part of the strategy is, do we want a subscription model? How are we going to retain this client? Like how we build our business out to retain that client for as long as possible. How are we developing brand and brand loyalty? These are very mid to long term things that are strategic in nature. Price increasing, again, like you can't just increase price. It has to be strategic. Like, why are you allowed to increase price, right? Like, why will your customers allow you where increasing price is a positive and not a negative? Add-ons to products. So it's like, we have this product line. We're going to increase lifetime value by adding this new product line. Addition of product line, again, very strategic in nature. Upselling people to higher models. So like bringing on an additional line that may be like a higher ticket, So you have one price point, then you have another version of the product that's a higher price point. All of these things, again, mid to long term in nature, highly strategic, not short term. So let's go over to the other side of the equation and talk about the characteristics of customer acquisition costs. So the first one, limited control by the company. And like what we really mean by this is if you've been a marketer in more than one industry, you know that there's like set prices. So when you're talking about buying ads, for example, is probably one of the best examples of this. If you're buying clicks, like certain clicks on Google, like if you know that the price is set at $10 a click, $20 a click, perhaps.
By industry.
Yeah. And it's by industry, right? So yes, you could get very good quality scores, which drive this down, of course. However, it's still determined highly by the market. So like you have very limited control on that. Yes, you can influence quality score, but that's about it.
And just to round out what you were saying there, Nick, so highly influenced by the market. Google Ads, a good example. You have certain industries that are highly competitive and other industries that are less competitive. The ones that are highly competitive, your acquisition cost is likely going to be much more expensive to acquire a customer if it's more competitive, but it also depends on the size of the market. So if the market's very big in comparison to the number of players out there, if it's a mature market versus a new market, all of these things factor into customer acquisition cost. Another example is in a brand new market where people don't yet where let's say the market's not widely understood. Let's say it's like a new technology that's coming out and it's not widely distributed. It's not that well understood yet. Generally, it's going to be much more expensive to acquire those early adopters versus a mature market where people understand. So you're not having to educate nearly as much.
Yeah. When we talk about highly influenced by market, this really means that there is limited control. The last item, which kind of rounds this thing out, is it's immediate to midterm in nature. So for example, like if you like getting your quality score from say like a 2 or a 3 on Google to 7 or 8, if you know what you're doing, if you have the appropriate like skill sets within your business, this isn't something that should take too long to do in the great scheme of things. It's again short to medium term in nature. It's not medium to long term, like say like strategy and pivoting and all of these things are. The nice thing about this is that when we talk about customer acquisition costs as a mitigation of cost, it's nice because things can happen very fast, right? You can ad optimize very quickly. If you already have traffic running, you can improve your CRO, your conversion rate optimization in a way where you're going, if you're getting like very low conversions, like 1% or something like that, you could go to 2%. And all of a sudden your conversions double. And that can happen if you unlock the sauce, like the secret sauce really quickly. Like that can happen in 1 month, 2 months. Whereas like getting a subscription model off the ground, which is on the lifetime value side, it's like that can take months and months. Right. Yeah. So again, to wrap this thing up, like on the customer acquisition cost side, highly limited control by the company, highly influenced by the immediate to midterm in nature. And a lot of this is going to come down to like the skills of the people in your marketing team, who your partners are, and how they're looking at this, right? Because big changes quickly and then they taper off over time.
Perfect. Until next time.